Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Think Catalyst podcast. I'm Ricardo Ferraris. I'm here with my business partner, Vivek Kuchibotla, for another weekly podcast, one which I think we're going to have fun with. Vivek, how are you?
I'm good, and I'm looking forward to this podcast.
Okay.
It's a quick peek behind the curtains of the wild and crazy world of advertising.
Right, right. You actually came up with this idea, so I give you credit, but I think it's one that I as soon as you brought it up, immediately I had flashes of my career and my past in advertising. Because what, Vivek?
Well, because we spent our lives doing this, and we
Right,
need to find an explanation as to why we did it. So
right.
I don't know. I don't know.
So we're going to dedicate this podcast to the quirky things that happen in this business, right? Funny things. And we want to make it fun because it's an unusual business and because there are interesting things that happen that you would have never thought would happen, but here they are. And we've listed a few of them.
And now that I think about it, the fact that I spent the first 10 years of my career on the marketing side, in the relatively sane world of the corporation, and then moved to the agency, may have been the trigger for me to actually notice the quirks, the
Right.
weirdness that goes on in agencies. And I think if you start out in agencies, you just assume this stuff is normal, and it's not. It's quirky as hell. Yeah.
You want to start?
Yeah. Actually, in the wild and crazy world of advertising, anyone can be anything,
Mhm.
right? So back on the corporate side, if you study accounting, chances are you'll end up in the finance department. Or if you're an engineer, you might go to marketing, or you might actually work in the factory.
Right.
Uh, but in an agency, what you do and what you studied generally bear no connection
Right.
whatsoever. Um, and you're going to find engineers who write copy, or we have a mutual friend who we won't mention, but he'll probably recognize himself when he hears the podcast, who was a creative, an art director, and then became a data guy, a person who was fascinated by data and numbers, and how to interpret that, and make sense of it, which is unusual, no? Um,
I'm an economics major. I didn't study communications or advertising, but I thought it was an interesting business to get into, at least while I was thinking of maybe doing graduate school. And I ended up not going to graduate school. And my first agency, Saatchi and Saatchi Compton, which was a great agency back then, um, was my master's. But anyways, I've found, I remember when I joined the agency, the first thing I thought it was Hollywood, by the way. I thought it was Hollywood
of
when I
course,
went into
of
advertising.
course.
And the first thing that they said is you're coming to the client meeting and you're serving the coffee. Okay. So that was like my intro. But there were copywriters, were a lot of them were like psych majors, um psychology majors, English majors, some literature. There was a few people that had studied some very strange, some very odd studies, history, geography, and I thought, where did this come from? And it just, but then, interestingly enough, I think what piques people in advertising is curiosity and doing things differently. And I think that if you have that in your in your profile, I think that it allows you at least to come into the business and at least evaluate it if it's something that you want to do going
You
forward.
know, I've met a lot of British advertising practitioners. There's a link here. I don't know why. A lot of people who studied geography in England who ended up working in advertising.
Yeah.
Now, I see no link
Uh,
whatsoever between geography and advertising. But my grand conclusion here is that people who are largely unemployable everywhere or have degrees that would not get them a job anywhere, they're welcome in advertising. There's a place for them in advertising. So
all right.
that's
So
it's a
point one,
welcoming business in that sense.
point one, anyone can be anything in the advertising business.
Yeah.
Point two, I learned this very quickly. Again, probably within the first 2 or 3 days that I was in the agency. Point two is there is an unspoken but powerful pecking order inside the agency. And quickly you will find out that at least in the advertising agencies, those who rule are the creatives, and then everyone else cascades down.
So what's the pecking order?
All right. The way I've seen it, and I think we share it, is the creatives are at the top, right? Followed by the planners, right? The strategic planning folks and the ones who do the briefs and do probably, do a lot of the investigations and the studies, followed by account management, which this is where I was. And then at sort of more at the bottom is the media people, and then the finance and administrative department. So
They're the to use a caste system term, they're the untouchables. They're
right,
way down there,
way down
right?
there. They were
Way
actually,
down.
they were in the bottom floors of the agency. I remember
Oh,
we were
absolutely.
we were the creatives were on the top floor, then and then us, and then awful.
I remember this is a true story. Um, I used to work at Leo Burnett, Venezuela. We had 3 floors in a building, and it wasn't very pretty offices, but the account management floor was passable. The creative floor was chaos, and then you had the media floor, and the media people used to share that floor that was like a dump with the traffickers, the messengers who
Oh yeah.
take stuff to different media. And I used to have a girl who worked with me who used to hate to go down there because every time she'd go into the media department, she'd get catcalled by all the messengers. And it's just, but that's sort of where media lived in the ecosystem. Um,
Right around 2000 when media agencies split from advertising agencies. Um, that was their revenge. That was the revenge of the media people, and
oh yeah.
they they're a different breed, or they're different breeds, creatives, account media, they're different breeds. I think that the media people um saw it as revenge. Now, interestingly enough, today, and I've worked in at the account side at creative agencies, at agencies before they separated, then it was creative agencies, and then, my last 8 years I worked at a media agency. Media is where all the action happens. Media is where the budgets are. Media is where the revenue is. Of course, media with the advent of digital and technology and so forth has taken a much bigger role. Media agencies are much more strategic in what they do, not just transactional. And there's a lot of media executives that are now running holding companies and running agencies. So God bless them.
There's going to be some upheaval in the pecking order, I think.
Right.
There's going to be some changes.
We'll talk a little bit later now about, well, actually, and then let's go on to the next point, because the we'll talk a little bit about, you know, the different personalities that happen there, but um, the point number three is there's a lot of very obedient rebels in the agency pecking order and the agency structure. So why don't you comment about that a little bit, Vivek?
Yeah, when you say very obedient rebels, that sounds like an oxymoron. It doesn't make any sense. How
Right.
can you be a rebel and be obedient at the same time? And I think here we're fundamentally talking about the creatives. And the creatives like to think of themselves as being, you know, nonconformists, and they're always the first group to stick it to the man and the establishment.
Mm.
Uh, they do not like listening to the normies. I mean, they look down on the normies. Their credo is screw the establishment. But it's interesting. I mean, that screw the establishment is about as rebellious as you can get. However, um, when you think about what the establishment is actually pushing nowadays, and you walk into an advertising agency, you will find that the rebels are 100% behind whatever the establishment is pushing, be it climate change, be it support for one cause or the other. They are 100% aligned with the establishment, and I think it's hard to understand. It doesn't make much sense. You got to see it. You want to talk about how they dress? That to me, that's
Oh,
a dead giveaway. That's a
sure.
dead giveaway.
All black, jeans, under
Skinny jeans.
skinny jeans, underground brand sneakers, t-shirts with weird and challenging messages. Um, you know, I gotta tell you, as an account person, when I first started in the business, people, my peers, were absolutely in complete fear of going down to see the creatives. I mean,
Of course.
get completely chewed out, often not even allowed to participate in meetings. You know, we were, just a completely, outlawed group in their floor. Um, hardly any account people would ever go down there. It was complete fear. But anyways, but they dress differently, they comb differently, they they would listen to different, I guess, music. Um, try they actually made it a huge effort to try to be completely different and stand apart and not be part of the normal scenery, I guess I would say.
But I think the interesting thing is when you see them individually, they look very rebellious, right? But
Mm,
then when you see 10 of them standing together, it's very clear that it's a uniform,
mm,
right? I
yeah,
mean, the dressing in black. You got to dress in black. That makes you a creative, right? You got to have a well-groomed, unkempt beard, right?
yep,
Uh, your hair can never be properly brushed. It has to be carefully unkempt. Um, it's I find it very funny because after a while you get to see that it's a uniform,
right,
and rebels should not really wear uniforms. It's not really consistent.
yeah,
But you'll find it in every agency, in every market in the world. No question.
right.
Yeah. So that's
Departments,
that's the obedient rebels.
yeah. Point four. Departments have actually genders in the ad agency. I mean, you tend to find more women in the account service side, you know, the las chicas de cuentas, as they say in Spanish,
Las
or
chicas de cuentas.
right, so they run, account management is what they have the contact with the client and sort of organize all the work within the agency, and there tend to be more women doing that. And then on the creative side, Vivek,
Mainly guys.
mainly guys,
Oh,
more guys.
you're starting to see a few women,
Yeah.
but it's a male dominated profession for some reason. I guess that has to do a
No,
little bit with the rebellious tendencies. I don't know.
but not male dominated profession. Males tend to be more on the creative side. If you look at it now, today, ad agencies skew more female than
Oh
male.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. And
Without a doubt.
there's a lot of women who are now running agencies. They are the managing
Without a
directors.
doubt.
They are also the creative directors and so forth. But generally, and a little bit generally speaking, and a little bit more in the past, obviously in the past it was more men, but men were dominating the creative department, the production department. They were doing, the film and all that stuff. So the art and the craft, but it's changed around. And
Well,
the
but
ladies were running the accounts.
the ladies were always running the accounts.
Right.
But I think it, this is one of the curiosities of this industry. I mean, women have had leadership positions forever
Yeah.
in this industry. I mean, yeah, maybe not in the Mad Men days, but 20 years ago, 25 years
Sure.
ago, you had a lot of women CEOs.
Yeah.
And with very important positions. But if you look at the absolute numbers in a creative department, it's probably going to skew 75-80% male. And if you look at an account management department, it might be even higher, might be 90% in favor of women. And as a general rule, as you said, when you look at the whole agency, when you add up all the different departments where women dominate, you're probably going to have a higher percentage of women than men working in the agency.
What about research, planning? I found more women,
In research,
yeah,
definitely.
and in planning as
Definitely.
well.
Yeah.
I
Without
think
a
it's
doubt.
fascinating. I personally, I think, the business today is much more skewed to women. They are, they seem to have there's a better fit with them running the business, and I don't know. It just seems to work out that way. So
I,
curious.
I also think that women, by their nature, um, are the job of account management
Yeah.
comes more naturally to them nowadays than what account management used to be 20 years ago. So they just take to it
They're better
better.
organized. They're better
They're better
organized.
organized, and they have a knack of dealing with kids, which helps with the creatives.
Absolutely. It's a big kindergarten. It's a huge
Yeah.
kindergarten. Well said.
This podcast is officially canceled as of now, but we got to say it. We got to tell the truth. We got to tell the truth.
What's the last point? I want to comment on the last
Uh,
point.
well, anyone who's had a son or daughter who's a teenager will immediately recognize this point. Agency people have all the answers, whether they have them or they don't.
Yep.
They're always right, even if they're not right.
Yeah.
Right? Just like a teenager. And there's a lot of examples of this. I mean, agency people will scoff at marketers because marketers don't understand brands. Sure, they do.
Mm-hmm.
But the agency people understand brands sometimes not as much as marketers do. But no, in the agency world, they know brands. Marketers know jack shit about brands.
Right.
And this one I have to say because it makes me laugh and it drives me nuts at the same time. You're gonna find a 26-year-old planner who is going to give you a lecture on raising children or the ins and outs of married life. They've never experienced it.
Right.
They don't know what it's like.
Right.
Whatever they know about it, they may have read in a book.
Right.
But they will tell you. They will tell you exactly what's going on. It reminds me of when my kids were small. My sister, who decided that she wasn't going to have kids, um, she's married, but she didn't have kids. She would always tell me how to deal with every crisis that I had to deal with my kids.
Right.
She never had any, right? And she could handle kids for 15 minutes at a stretch, but she had the answers always. That's
Right.
agency behavior.
If you think about it, agencies produce work where 85% of the audience is, you know, average people, consumers, not the quirky, very different people that are in the advertising business. And we're talking to middle America and so forth, but they're not. So, and interestingly enough, the business skew is very, very young, right? And who do we sell to? Who's got purchasing power, Vivek? Who has the purchasing power
All
in the
all
consumers?
guys like you and
Right,
me, the 55 plus.
right,
That's where all the money is.
right.
I used to do bit of work in the Hispanic market in the US, and it always struck me that agency people would talk about Game of Thrones. They'd know all the ins and outs of Game of Thrones. They'd never miss a, a chapter of Game of Thrones, and they read the books, and they're just experts. But they never ever watched La Telenovela, which is what their audience watches. Their
Soap
audience
operas.
doesn't really watch Game of Thrones,
Right.
but and yet they know exactly what the audience thinks and does and how they live and how to persuade them.
I must admit, after high school, when I was in high school, we would rush to go home and at 3 p.m. watch General Hospital. Okay. But anyways,
Oy.
that
Uh,
was
but
that was 40 years ago.
yeah, but
But
but but your dad worked at Procter, who funded that stuff. So I mean, there's some bias here.
in any case, my experience, I got into the business. Um, it wasn't planned. I remember friends of mine were in New York and said, "Hey, come to New York. We're working in investment banking, and there's a lot of jobs here, etc." And I went, and I thought advertising would be interesting. I went to a couple of interviews. I ended up getting a job with Saatchi and Saatchi Compton. I wasn't really sure about what I was getting into. I thought it would be interesting, and I found it to be very, very different from what I had actually thought. But I was immediately attracted to it. And the whole concept of developing communications and convincing people and driving differentiations between brands and brand building, it just became fascinating. And it comes with a lot of baggage and territory that, you find along the way. You can't read it in a book. So, most interesting and awakening. Let me tell you, it was an awakening for me.
The the difference between advertising and other professions,
Mm,
I think, is that accounting or law or finance, those are actually professions.
right,
Advertising is not a profession, it's an affliction.
right,
And if you're afflicted by it, you'll stay in it.
right.
And a lot of us who've spent all our careers in the few lucid moments we have, we think, why did I do this? And still you spend your career in it. And so it's an affliction. It's not a profession. And if you're afflicted, you're afflicted. That's the bottom line.
It's interesting.
But it's not for everyone. It's not for everyone.
No, it's not.
But if you have the affliction, it's a lot of fun.
By the way, wait, all that said, Vivek, it's also a business where you need to be responsible. Okay, advertising has elected presidents and people in powerful positions that, maybe didn't turn out that great, it convinces you to
Sure.
buy products that maybe you don't need, you know. Um, so there's a level of responsibility that comes along with that in the middle of this kindergarten. In any case, this was all
Yep.
about quirky things, and we were just having some fun, and we thought it would be interesting just to share it with you. I'm sure most people who have worked in the business will nod their head to many of the things that we mentioned this afternoon, but it's a lot of fun. To me, it's the only thing that I've known. So very happy to have been in it. Anyways,
Yep.
any other closing thoughts, Vivek?
No, no, that's it. Actually, one closing thought. Oh, because we're talking about the agency in many cases that was. And certainly a lot of the things that we talk about still exist in the agency that is. But it would be nice to hear from some of our listeners, some of our younger listeners, to see if there's any new quirks that they have picked up
Right.
that we didn't call out here. That'd be interesting.
With all the technology and digital and all the new things that have come into the business, I'm sure there's quite a few. In any case, it's a very noble business, and we like it, and we have enjoyed it. And Vivek and I are in a privileged position to be able to talk about a lot of things that sometimes people don't talk about in advertising. So, thanks again for joining us on this podcast. We will see you soon. Please comment, please subscribe, please share. It's always fun. And we'll see you next week. Vivek, have a good one.
You too. Take care.
Bye.